to it fast. Right here on the Anycast. Make it strong, make it last. Right here on the Anycast.
Okay, welcome. We are here with one of the OG, both CacheFly supporters and podcast supporters. Paul, how the hell are you?
I am the hell great, man. It is fun to finally get on here. It took till season 2 for it to happen, but it's good to be here, man.
For those who don't know you, who are you? How'd you get here? And in 2 minutes or less, what are you selling so that we can all get people to fast forward past what you're selling and get to the good stuff?
In 2000, actually, I got a vision for audio online. Don Katz, Audible, had dinner with him, and he presented a vision for audio that just blew my mind. And Audible continues to dominate in a certain space of that today. I wanted in 2000. I couldn't get in because it was $500,000 to get in. They got 70%. We got 30%. And they just signed Tom Clancy and Harry Potter. So I was going to play that game. 2004, podcasting pops up. And what podcasting represented to me at the time was now I can play Audible. It's actually gotten a lot bigger. It's gotten a lot more exciting. But the idea of someone with a message being able to distribute it without censors, without distribution requirements, without anything, directly to the audience, spam free, was really, really exciting to me. So I started from day one, did not make money until at least a decade into it, but was there from the beginning. You know, the first podcast event where you and I met, you know, I love to tell everybody that when at the end of the podcast event, the entire podcast event met in the hotel bar afterwards. You know, there was a page of podcasts available at the time. Now it's gotten slightly bigger. So I run a company called the Podcast Partnership. We partner with people to help get their podcast out the door.
Okay. So big topic that we both stumbled on at Movement. The AI overlords are coming. Or they're already here and we're afraid of them taking over more. Seemed to be a lot of FUD going on. How do you see AI changing the landscape?
Let's talk about the FUD first. Because podcasting means 10 different things to 10 different people, there are different assignations of the value in the midst of all of this. For some, it is art. And the idea of going into the cutting room and sculpting the perfect sonic soundscape for your podcast adventure is really exciting to some. And the idea that AI might take that away. There are a lot of editors who are afraid of losing their art. There are a lot of by-the-hour editors who are afraid of losing some work. Writers for show notes, this kind of stuff, all these things. There are some who put a great deal of value into it. There are some who have found a great deal of value in it. And AI really, really shakes that up in some ways that people have to discern. And I think this at the end is going to be a good thing, but I think it's going to be bloody at the beginning. Everybody should ask what role AI plays in their podcast. The joke is, you know, in AI, they say you're not going to be replaced by AI. You're going to be replaced by someone who uses AI. And
Right.
I'd say the exact same thing to be true for podcasts. Your podcast is not going to be replaced with an AI podcast. It's going to be replaced with a podcast that uses AI to do the stuff that AI should be doing.
Sure.
Now, even longer than podcasting, I've been a sci-fi nerd. And the big theme of sci-fi is, you know, when we lose, Matt? We lose when we do the work that the computer should be doing.
Right.
Every sci-fi story is that. And what amazes me is we now can click a button and make all the background noise go away. That only can make our podcast better.
Sure.
We can now click a button and get a first draft of our show notes or the salient points of the podcast. I mean, when this thing comes out on YouTube, you know, the chapter marks are going to be done by AI.
Right.
We can click a button and have that first level of stuff happen. And we can do two things with that. We can cut our time in half, which many should. Many are spending too much money on their podcast. Or we can go one step further because that first step was done by the computers.
Right.
So the AI FUD comes from a lot of different places, but a lot of it is just that simple fact that what is my role in this? And your role in this is the production of content that computers can't make for us.
Sure. Yeah, and I mean, you mentioned the word some people think of their podcast as art. I certainly wouldn't say that what I'm making is art. Certainly not in the artiste way, maybe in an artist way, but certainly not in an artiste way. But I can see how the people who consider it somewhat, you know, the art that they're to borrow your phrase, sculpting with their bare hands or their bare vocal cords, it would be impure. Their art would become impure if something, were to get involved. But at the same time, that's not how art ever works, right?
Ever.
Like the thing that stood out to me that at Movement was the idea that we needed a disclaimer if AI was involved. And
I'm going to interrupt you.
yes,
That was a theme, but what was interesting was that was level 1 of the theme.
mm-hmm.
If you dug down a little bit in that theme, it was AI is needed. A disclaimer about AI is needed if it's a part that I hold dear. Nobody had problem with AI doing certain things. They just had problems with AI doing other things. And, that kind of stuff really bothers me. Either every element of AI has to be mentioned, or no elements of it have to be mentioned. And maybe part of it should be that, but that have to guilty, we're somehow ripping off the world if AI takes out the background noise, we're somehow ripping off the world if we don't tell the world that AI took out the background noise. Just ridiculous.
Yeah, and even if it's more than that, right? Like even the idea that, let's talk about other art, right? So music. Or forget music. Start with movies. Do you interrupt the movie to tell people that the special effects were done with CGI?
Exactly. The rock that hits him in the head is not real.
Yeah, and everybody needs to know that.
Right.
Like, let's take a pause and let's make sure the disclaimer is known so that nobody knows we actually shot this movie in outer space, and we were not, in fact, using a warp drive, and we were not on the USS Enterprise, just so everybody knows. Some part of consuming art has to involve this, this suspension of disbelief.
I think right now there are a lot of people who are making a lot of conflict from things that we don't necessarily need to make conflict out of. I think there's that. I think that's a subset of some people who, I don't know, dropped as a kid or whatever it is. But the other thing is I think in our search for meaning and in our search for value, we want to know that what we're doing is as real as it can be. And I think what's fascinating is, and that part I agree with, but the real as it can be could be real good use of AI to make the interview better. Could be real good use of Pro Tools. I remember I grabbed a live album from an artist I liked, and it was really funny because in the liner notes, they actually said, and by the way, most live albums, they do some enhancement in the studio, and this one wasn't enhanced. And then what was funny was I listened to the live album later. I'm like, yeah, this doesn't sound enhanced. I don't like this as much as I like other live albums.
No.
So by just spilling the beans, I didn't enjoy this as much.
Yes, the number of live albums without an overdub are almost non-existent.
Exactly. And should we disclose the fact that you and I, even though we're talking to each other, are in 2 different locations?
Not only that, this might get edited later.
Exactly. You might not have heard everything.
Yeah, you think all the season 1 episodes were only an hour and a half? No, it was 5 hours. We cut those down to an hour and a half just so they'd be nice and small. But yeah, same thing, right? Editing. What do you mean Seinfeld wasn't all one take?
Right.
Gasp.
Right.
Put something in the time capsule here. So, where are we in podcast evolution on delivering whatever it's meant to deliver? And where are we? So where are we from start to now? And where are we from now to 7 years from now? What's in front of us?
I think the mechanism is in play. I think we have everything we need to do what it is that we want to do. I think the language for what that means is not quite there yet. Season 2, it's going to be all about podcasts. You're going to interview podcasters from all walks of life. What are you looking for?
A good story. I'm super interested these days in how people got to where they are, specifically around doing podcasts, having a show, building an audience, having an audience. And what I think we're going to find by the end of it is for however many episodes that we end up in season 2, there are going to be that many number of very different stories with some commonalities, right? Some conclusions that might be the same. But, these are people that are choosing to put themselves out there in the world, and not only in the world, but on the internet, and have the comments and the reviews and all those things happen. So, it's still a pretty brave thing to do, to put yourself out there, I would think, especially when your name's on the show. And so a lot of these people, I think, are not necessarily trailblazers in the sense that we were trailblazers in 2005, but it's still a brave thing to do, and it's still early. And so I think the stories that got people to where they are, I think, are going to be really interesting. I think the predictions are going to be really interesting. And I think the random tangents and rabbit holes are going to be more interesting than everything else. So I'm excited. All right, Paul, thank you.
Thanks, Matt.
Another round, so much more to talk about. Gonna aim to satisfy with help from CacheFly. Get to it fast. Right here on the Anycast. Make it strong, make it last. Right here on the Anycast. The Anycast podcast, brought to you by CacheFly.